Governor, thanks for your time.
Of course.
So these presidential budget statements are basically just an outline of their priorities. Was this not what you expected?
In some ways it was what I expected, but sometimes I was surprised at the cuts in agriculture. What has rural America ever done to President Trump except vote for him? And yet they got some of the largest cuts. I think from the point of view of Colorado, there are obviously some losses where, if this went forward the way it was presented, there would be some serious concerns, but also some benefits, right? The additional military spending, we're got a lot of aerospace and military spending in Colorado. There was an emphasis on cybersecurity. We do a lot of cybersecurity. So I think there's pluses and minuses, but you want to make sure you're still protecting the last and the least.
Let's talk about those potential benefits first. Do we get the sense that military spending is actually going to end up in Colorado, or might it go to other applications and we never really see a big impact?
Well, we don't know. And obviously they're talking about some aircraft, some ships, some naval vessels. So it's hard to predict at this point. And again, this is the beginning of what will be an extended conversation.
Mm-hmm. What concerns you most?
Well, I think overall, there are lots of little things, right? The cuts to subsidies to rural airports, right? And how do for many of the smaller communities, those subsidies are the only direct line of connection, of transportation that connects them. The long haul cuts to Amtrak. If those cuts are as severe as they might be, that could affect some of the trains that go through Colorado. But I look more at the block grants. The cuts to all the cultural investments, the housing cuts in vouchers, and how we're going to deal with homeless. We've already got a real affordability issue around housing in Colorado, and a lot of homeless, right? To cut back from the federal government's been our partner in most of these efforts. If they cut back, it just makes a steep hill a little bit steeper.
Let's talk philosophically, though, from the point of view that if it's a priority for Colorado, then Coloradans should spend their money on it.
Yeah, except that generally on things like transportation and housing, there's a system that's been built up over 50 or 60 years where it's a partnership. It's a priority for us, but it's also a priority for the federal government. Listen, I'm no stranger to making tough cuts. I understand that every time you make any kind of a cut, somebody's a loser, right? And you've got to be able to defend that cut. But I want to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and just for the sake of making cuts, we don't get rid of valuable programs. Look at the strides we've made forward in terms of our air quality, right? Remember, well, you're too young to remember, no offense, too young to remember the brown cloud that, when I first came out here in 81, that's all we talked about. It was one point, I think in 85, some commentator said, it's the one thing that Colorado is going to be number one in. This was before the Avalanche or the Broncos had ever won championships. Now our air, it's not perfect, but we've made huge progress. And the EPA was a partner all the way along with that. They helped fund a bunch of those programs. To have them eviscerated, because we've still got a ways to go, I don't know, I want to make sure that we're still the key programs, the grants to some of our smaller rural communities where they're working to totally rebuild their water purification plants or their sewage facilities. That stuff's important.
Last question. So you obviously knew the moment that President Trump was elected that there were going to be things that were going to happen you weren't going to like. What is the message that you're going to send to our congressional delegation in terms of, above all, protect this, or please at least get us this in the end?
Well, again, there are so many cuts. That's a long list.
How do you prioritize?
Well, that's the key. I think you have to look at A, how many people it affects, and then B, the level of impact, right? How deeply does it hurt an individual or a family? And that's a pretty complicated algorithm to figure out exactly how do you measure one cut against another. It's going to take a lot of work. We've got right now each of our agency heads reaching out to their federal counterparts and talking to the people in the budget office in the White House, saying, now, what do you mean by this, and what's your emphasis here, and how many vouchers would we lose, or is this really the grant funding? Figure out exactly what they're talking about, and then go from that point and say, all right, here's where we have to lobby, and we need all of our congressional representatives, both Senator Gardner, Senator Bennett, and all the representatives of Congress, all on the same page. And I think we do that as well as anybody right now. Our representatives in Congress they talk to each other, they again, they don't always agree, of course, but on the important things, they generally come together.
Okay, I lied. This is actually my last question. Would you not say, though, that just based on where our congressional delegation is along the ideological spectrum, that if we can get Senator Bennett and Senator Gardner together on something, and if we can get Congressman Perlmutter and Congressman Mike Kaufman together on something, that we stand a decent chance of holding on to that priority item, just based on where they are in the spectrum?
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, if we can get Senator Bennett and Senator Gardner to agree, and these guys are having dinner once a month. They work together probably more closely than two senators from different parties in any other state, right? And the same thing as you say, Congressman Perlmutter, Congressman Kaufman, they're different parties, but they're pretty adept at going in and battling for what's really important. So I think if we get everyone to agree, we'll do pretty well.
Governor, thank you for your time.
Sure.
Appreciate it very much.